Thank you, Andrew, and welcome, folks. My name is Matthew Winn, as Andrew said, and I'm the Chief Exec of the Community Trust across Cambridgeshire and surrounds. And yesterday afternoon, to go on a story, I was at a board away day that Bob Geldof wasn't at. So there's going to be no name dropping in my session, unfortunately. It was very obvious, Andrew. I'm here, I think, not as an expert in this area, because my experts from my organisation are in the audience and you're going to hear from them later on, and they know far more about this than I do. But it's important for us all across health and social care services, whichever sector you work in, is that we really, I suppose, tussle with how do we make this approach we put behind, I guess, the approach from being an initiative to saying this is our core business and it's something that we just do and we just accept as normal, rather than some very enthusiastic extroverts get by with talking about all the time, naming no names and trying to not look anywhere in the room. So I think that's that's my challenge for the session I'm going to have now. But I'm going to start with this bunch. These are staff from the organisation that I have the privilege to lead. And I can talk the talk about how we can systemise this. I can talk about theories about how we can embed this. But you will know this more than I do. But actually, it's what... Was this what a pointer on? Let's try some. Oh, there we are. Look at that. It's about what you all do in your interactions. So it's whether the reablement worker working with the frail elderly person who's just come out of hospital embeds health coaching in the approach with that person there and then. It's about the falls response vehicle working with the paramedic going out when someone has collapsed at home, hasn't got a fractured neck or femur, and then talking straight away about what are we going to do? What do you want to do? What's going to keep you safe? What's not going to worry your daughter who's going to be on the phone in the next 10 minutes and then for every half an hour for the next 2 weeks because they don't live next door to you? It's about the sexual health services going out into marginalised communities and talking with people with HIV about what do they want in their lives? What do they want to achieve? When you're newly diagnosed, what does that impact on you and how does it impact on your network? It's about the rapid response team. It's about the breastfeeding team, etc., etc. This is what it's about, not bizarre chief executives trying to explain how you make this normal. But I suppose we need to just think about strategically why what you've been spending the whole day and months and years of work is important. And I've just put down 5 areas that I think this is important for us to really grasp in an industrial scale. So let's be honest, the NHS is quite paternalistic, maternalistic, old-fashioned in how it treats its patients quite often. We don't mean to do it, but we've systemised ourselves to know that we are right. Whatever professional group you're in, whether you're registered or unregistered, quite often we come across to the people that we're paid to serve as we know best. And you will know as well as I do, those expectations are changing. When you go to see your GP, or when you sit in front of a therapist or a consultant, you don't accept just being told, actually, you can only come at 3:40 in the afternoon in 5 weeks' time. And I know that's really inconvenient that you've got 4 children to pick up, but tough. That's what we're going to offer you. We don't accept that any longer. So I suppose the challenge is, in every bit of our interaction with patients and families, do we accept that we are doing things that make sense to our patients, whether they be young or old? So we need to be much more adaptable as a health and care system to actually say, we put the interventions in that patients find helpful, because we can't rescue everybody. We shouldn't be rescuing everybody. We shouldn't be testing everybody to the inch of their life. We should be establishing from an educated, informed, sympathetic and empathetic approach what we want to do with the person and the family sitting in front of us, rather than just drive our own agenda. I suppose the second thing is, we've proven that it works. It makes an impact. And yes, we haven't done a random control trial yet, but your experience and the experience of people in your organisation have shown that the impact of health coaching makes a difference to patients. And so I suppose I could finish there and just say, why would we want to do anything else? If it makes a difference, if patients, their families can see the positive nature of this, then we should adopt it anyway. We shouldn't just adopt it. We should, if we're in Colchester or Braintree or in Luton or in Cirencester, wherever we are, we should be stealing what you're all doing in the room and making it real in our organisations, and be unashamedly proud about doing that. And actually, I would also say, from our corporate nature of being in the NHS, we should be sharing what we're doing and giving everybody the tools to do what we are doing so they don't have to recreate it. Because that's another thing we're fabulous at. I suppose the third element for me is, there's a business case why this is important. My type of organisation live off a block contract, i.e. we're asked to do whatever comes through our door each year for no extra money. And there are lots of organisations with what you work in around the room that's the same, whether you're a mental health trust, social enterprise, etc. That means we have lots of service areas that are facing 14, 15, 18% increases in demand each year, above and beyond the fact that our populations are ageing and getting more frail and have comorbidities. So there is a very real need for us to have a different mindset, because we all know that the NHS is not going to be given copious amounts of money as it was 10 years ago. That is not going to be our reality. Simon Stevens and NHS England published a 5-year plan a couple of weeks ago, which I hope you've had a chance to read, even if it's just a summary, and it's quite clear. Yes, there is a funding gap, but, and it's a huge but we, folks, need to do things differently in how we design our services, how organisations collaborate, but also how we interact with patients to make ourselves more effective and more efficient. So there is an absolute business case for this, and that ties into number 4. If you, and I know there was some talk this morning and conversations about where we're going to get the funding to make this a reality. We spend a lot of money. Our eyes wince when we think about how much public money goes into the NHS, and yet we worry about funding one member of staff that will cost, £1,500 to be a trainer, who could then train 10 people a month in their organisation. So the unit cost of the person who is trained in the organisation ends up at £100 per person? The maths stack up. It's as simple as that. I'll talk about how you perhaps influence and get that to become a reality. And I think I've covered the last bit, and I'm not going to hammer it home again. I'm always astounded, both personally and professionally, that we accept some of the ways that we do our work. Is it a good idea for a 85-year-old with multiple conditions who may be under a community matron, seeing their GP regularly, having to see a respiratory consultant, a heart failure consultant, being called back every 6 months because that's what we do? Come back to outpatients appointments in 6 months and we'll see how you are. Whereas no one, as yet, until you guys do your work and your colleagues, have said, actually, Mrs. Jones, what kind of health are you happy with? When are you worried about being really unwell? When is your family really worried about you? And these are the numbers and people you can call on who will live around a corner from you to give you that help, rather than spending 2.5 hours on a hospital transport vehicle to get you to an outpatient appointment where you sit for hours and therefore the interaction isn't particularly good when you get there. That is the models of care that I think things like health coaching can really drive a wedge through and say, why are we doing it, and do we need to do it? And let's get a different mindset going on how we do things. So, you're after lunch, your food's nicely seeping down, you're listening to someone who's got some views on life and won't stop talking for ages if we don't stop him. So I'm going to challenge you now. We don't need a microphone, you're all vocal people. What's stopping us changing what we do in this context? What's on your mind right now? And hopefully the slide I'm about to show might have some of those things on it. But what's stopping us changing what we do? What's really getting in the way?
Our need to be in control.
So our need to be in control, so that's about us. Our mindset, I think someone said. So that's two things which is entirely in our control.
The day job.
The day job. I'll come back to that.
Lack of support from the organisation.
I'll come back to that. Time. Be a bit more forensic than that. In what sense? Just too much to do?
Yeah. Time management so that we can actually manage the right workload.
Okay. So some of that's in your control, some of it's not. Okay. What else? Two more things. Come on at the back. You're not going to get away from it just because you're furthest away.
Culture.
Culture.
Within specific groups in an organisation.
Okay, so is that professional culture? Organisation culture?
Professional.
Okay. One more.
Courage. Just do things differently.
Okay. So we need courage. So someone's shouting out one more. So,
Say society's expectations, what we've kind of led them to believe to expect from us.
okay. So we've set ourselves quite a dependent healthcare system where we know best and people come to us to ask us our views. Okay. Yeah, one more.
Exhaustion of the workforce.
Yeah.
No headspace.
Yeah. So, I put a few down here as well. So fear of failure, we worry, and we worry what our peers are going to say. How many of you, when you first got trained and tried to do this approach, were worried about walking into a team meeting and trying to explain to your peers that you were going to do something completely different and got that bizarre look from half of them? I imagine quite a few. And that's a real drag on innovation because they are your peers. They're where you get support. They're the people that are either going to support you or sink you. So personal resilience and a network of people who can talk you through that conversation before you walk in, I think is really important because you can't innovators don't do things alone. They do them with other people and they get support from other people. I think someone mentioned not giving permission. I'm going to come on to permission because I think we hide behind that sometimes, but not getting permission from the organisation. It's not important enough. It's a fad. It's a nice new thing. Question mark. No, I mentioned there's no evidence base. You can imagine some people saying, well, I'm not going to do it because you can't show me the journal it was written in, and therefore I can be sure that it's ethical, got efficacy, and I can therefore put my great mind behind it. But as my medical director is sitting over there, and he regularly tells our board very little of what we do in the NHS has a real evidence base. We just do it anyway. What figure do you quote, David, regularly? 85%. There we are. Go and argue with him if he's wrong later. But not everything we do has to have an RTC or a peer-reviewed journal to say it's the right thing, I would suggest. And I suppose the other thing is, spelling mistake. Our team, not out team. Could be. Our team is okay. I suppose there is that malaise sometimes that actually it's all right. We're doing okay, thanks. But I suppose my challenge would be, are you really listening to the patient's experience of you giving care? You might be hitting your quality standards, you might be hitting your performance standards, but are you listening to your patients to say, are you giving the care in exactly the right way that you should be? And I suppose the other thing is, it's not going to feature folks on a mandated list out of your commissioners or anywhere else. Monitor are not suddenly going to pop up in the guidance that comes out in December, and health coaching is going to appear front of the bulletin. Fact. Doesn't mean it's not important. So, I suppose this is a mixture of my experience in how we've done it in our trust and also things that I think are important. So number one, and I'd challenge anybody to argue against this, but have a go. If it's right for patients, we should be introducing it. And I know some people said time, we're knackered, we've got so much work to do and this is just something else. But we are public servants paid in a caring organisation to care and support patients. And surely the rationale must go that actually if we found something that makes a positive impact on patients, then we should be doing it, however hard that is. Now, I don't mean to sound glib in that, but we have to be simplistic at times and say, does it work and does it make a positive impact? And the answer is yes. For me, that's a good enough reason. So let me tell you how things happened in our trust. I knew of things happening in health coaching. I happened to sit on the East of England Health Education Board. So I see some of the stuff that actually HEE are funding. So I knew it was going on. But it wasn't until some of my FAB team, Sarah and Joe and crew, who you're going to hear about later, actually went and did it. And then I was at a conference talking about something completely different. And I sat down and said, well, okay, what's going to make the difference? How are we going to make this an industrial scale in our trust? That we then had the conversation about what next. And then 100 people got trained after that, and we will double and keep on tripling those figures, I'm sure, as the months go forward. But it did take those individuals to get on, which takes me on to leadership. It's not just about chief executives and finance directors, it's about you all. And I said earlier I was slightly sceptical about asking permission. I suppose for me, that goes straight into what's important or what's not important in making this a reality. Do you have the culture in your organisation that you have to go and ask permission to do something that's good for patients? Because if the culture in your organisation is that this would get blocked, then that is slightly worrying. Is it that the space is very crowded and there are loads of initiatives and you're not being paid for this and A&E is spiraling out of control, i.e. there's lots of distraction? Well, I can understand that. But if you, as an enthusiastic individual or pair or trio in your organisation, really want to make this happen on an industrial scale, then whatever your banding, your grading, your seniority, you need to take the leadership and go and knock on some doors. I have to say, people in my organisation don't normally have any problem on knocking on my door. A, because I've never really had an office, so they can just come and find me. But B, that's the way that we operate, and that's why Joe and Sarah and crew just get on with it and come and find you and email me and say, is this all right? So I would say, number 4, if you're sitting there thinking and someone said, I'm going to be blocked, have you emailed the chief executive and said, please can I have 15 minutes of your time? Because I'm going to come and tell you about something that's going to change patients' lives in our hospital, in our mental health trust. Have you done that? If you haven't, why don't you get on and do it? Or your nurse director. Who's going to shoot you? You can apologise to your line manager later if they're affronted that you've gone round them. But no one's going to really care, are they? Because actually, if you get to the outcome that you want, you need to be as brazen as that and go and talk to the people that you think will make a difference in the organisation. And I suppose that goes into number 5 for me. When I listen to people like Joe and Sarah talk about how, say, on a physiotherapy list, they have managed to discharge people far quicker and get the new cohort of people coming through because they've agreed new parameters with those patients, they've agreed self-care models, and those people living at home know that they can ring them up and get their advice straight away rather than going through some convoluted referral system that puts them in a waiting pattern and goes on to an 18-week treatment program. If they've designed that, and that has made a difference, and therefore a whole cohort of patients are being treated and seen quicker, that is, for me, business as normal. It moves from being a nice initiative to this is the core part of what we do. You will have lots of modernisation techniques in your organisations, I'm sure, but actually doing something that allows you to deal with patients in a different way, discharge them, allow them to go off and do their own thing, and then have the ability to contact you directly for support. Wouldn't our health service be dramatically different if that was the case? Wouldn't it mean that actually you can get to see outpatients quicker because we stopped calling people back to outpatients? Wouldn't it mean that you didn't have to wait 19 weeks for a musculoskeletal intervention because we've got far more people caring for their own health, and actually the physiotherapists can concentrate on people that are in desperate pain at the moment? That, for me, folks, is a simple business plan that doesn't have to be war and peace. It's 2 or 3 pages saying, if we took this approach, we would be able to see these patients quicker, and that will benefit X, Y, and Z. Simple as that. Let's not overcomplicate it. That's what it's all about. And I suppose, and again, I don't mean to be demeaning to you all because you are this, because otherwise you wouldn't be at this conference. But if you guys don't have the enthusiasm to make this happen, no one else is. Contrary to popular belief, as a chief executive, if I stood up and said to our leadership forum that meets every quarterly, I think it's really important that you all get in health coaching and sort it out in your organisations, that only has a limited impact. If one of you is working from the opposite direction, having the conversations with 5 or 6 key clinicians to actually get things right, that is probably far more impactful than it is from someone being told to do something from the top. Because none of you, if you're honest, really like being told what to do from the top. You're far better at saying, I understand what you're talking about, I can apply that in my organisation. And I think in final things from me, because I'm not going to, not quite at the end, I'm not going to talk on forever because you've got other people to talk to, and we probably, I don't know, Andrew, got some time for questions if we want to, but I think the importance of the approach linked in with other types of tools and techniques that you will all be using all the time is absolute dynamite. And when I look across the portfolio in my organisation, I can see it being applied in nearly every single context, whether that would be a speech and language therapist who every October suddenly is inundated with referrals from schools because all the 5-year-olds are suddenly there and the teachers are worried about their development and their speech. What do? Refer to speech and language therapy. Waiting times go up to 22 weeks. Actually, if we got it right and supported those teachers and those families to do a health coaching type approach, we would be much more preventative and therefore allow the speech and therapist to really get involved in the people and the children and the families that desperately need their help, rather than the others who are perhaps worried well and probably just need another 6 months to grow up. And then they'll start talking and eating properly and their communication will be fab for the rest of their life. I could see it. We use it in end-of-life care. We use it on inpatient wards. We can use it in outpatients. We can use it in all clinical areas. So I suppose my challenge for us would be, we don't necessarily need someone else to fund this. If it costs £1,500 to actually train someone to be a trainer, that person can train an enormous amount of people in your organisations over a 2-year period, and those people will make an impact in everywhere that they are in their clinical area. That becomes a very easy business case. You can really learn from those that are doing it today and get their data off them to say, actually, what is the clinical outcomes? What are the patient outcomes that you are achieving? And then my suggestion is to you, you go and make a fuss in your organisations. You go and knock down the doors on the people that should be supporting you to do this. But more importantly, is you make this part of your normal practice day to day. And then, to tie in with a theme that you heard earlier, start publishing the stories from a patient perspective, because there's nothing more powerful for your boards, for your clinical groups, to hear the stories of patients who say, someone did something really different to me, and this is my story. That will get a lot of traction in your organisation. I hope that's helpful. It may not be, looking at the whimsical nature of some of your looks, but perhaps we could go to some questions if we've got time, Andrew.